Welcome back. I am John P. Today, I want to have a little bit of a discussion about watch alternatives. Here's the thing. On my Instagram, The Real John P., where you can find me a little bit about what I do behind the scenes at Delray Watch, where we buy, sell, trade watches, as well as my personal life and my personal watches, I receive questions and comments quite frequently from people that ask me about a few different alternatives to watches that may be very difficult to get depending on where you are, your relationship with authorized dealers, as well as so many other factors. And I try to get to so many people, but I want to try to consolidate my thoughts here on this because I do think that I could reach more people and help more people at scale. But I do understand that, if you, let's say you have the Rolex Submariner and you don't need to worry about it, I totally understand if watch alternatives are not for you. But to give an example, a watch that I have always provided to you and to my friends and anyone else, especially through Delray Watch, is something like the Girard Perregaux Laureato. Because we have watches that are difficult to obtain in the market, right? Think the Nautiluses, the Patek Philippe Nautiluses, think the Aquanaut now, think Rolex Submariner to an extent, think even talk about Rolex Oyster Perpetual, which is not on my wrist today. I'm still wearing a bit of a honeymoon phase with this Enicar, very cool Halloween colored Enicar Super Dive, a brand that I really have taken a liking to over the years. But going back to the original thought here, watches to alternatives that are popular or hard to get or highly in demand and sought after, alternatives to Submariner, alternative to Daytona, chronographs, things like that. These are watches we all know, hot, hard to get. And so I'm asked quite frequently, hey, John P., do you think it's a great idea to get the Girard Perregaux Laureato because perhaps it's difficult to obtain an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak? Depending on where you are in the world and the dial and so on and so forth, the reference, you get the idea. Or perhaps, hey John, do you think it would be great to get a Glashütte original CQ because I just can't happen to find a Submariner, Rolex Submariner at retail. Now Glashütte original has a green dial CQ, their dive watch, their answer to the Rolex Hulk Submariner. So there are a lot of these alternative watches out there. And the response from myself, now I know this is going to be very straightforward and obvious to some, but I think those that are on the fence, trying truly to decide, you're spending serious money here on a watch that you're going to be living with maybe every day, should I get A or B? My response is always, what do you like? What do you like better? What is the design? Now, when it comes to a Nautilus, unfortunately, without that high budget, over $100,000, 457.11, which retails a fraction of that, I can totally understand, and in which case it's prohibitive for a different reason, and it's not, finding the answer from someone that's going to say, yes, get the Nautilus instead of, an IWC Ingenieur. We're not really comparing apples to apples here, but when we're talking about a difference of, let's say, maybe even double the price, I think the conversation becomes a little bit more gray when we're talking about the long-term usage of the watch and the value in that regard, and also the upside potential. So more so than just saying, hey, buy what you like, I do understand there are different considerations. Now, specifically, I can share a story. There's a Gustavo in Mexico, very nice guy, very, very cool guy, and we've chatted here and there a little bit, and I've given him a little bit of advice, and he, a little bit of discourse online in that regard about different watches and things of that nature, and he recently picked up a Girard Perregaux Laureato. He had seen previous videos that I had done where I talked about it as an alternative to, let's say, an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. I've provided it as a nice watch, a nice value watch for so many other reasons, but he just loves it. He absolutely loves the watch. He thinks it's great. I think maybe he was thinking of a Royal Oak previously, but he loves the watch. It's quality, and it's almost like it exceeded all of his expectations for the watch, and that's just so nice to hear because when I talk about this, I share different watches that maybe we receive through the door at Delray Watch, or someone that does this every day, trading different watches and spending literally my whole day every day finding the best watches, the coolest watches, including alternative watches. It's really nice to see people actually agree to some extent and be able to use some of the things and the knowledge that I've found. So when we talk about the alternatives, there are some great alternatives out there, but using the word alternative, I think, is going to become less and less popular as time goes on because the watch collecting sphere is becoming so much more popular. So many people, more people are getting into watches. The brands are starting to really tighten up their distribution, cut back on the discounts. At Delray Watch, we're selling gray market Girard Perregaux Laureatos through a whole slew of dealers that we had. And Girard Perregaux kind of caught on to this, right? They've pulled back the dealer network a little bit. They've tightened that up. They've cut back on the discounts. And with that comes higher trading market prices, both new and pre-owned. And that bumps up the value of the watches. So when we talk about alternatives, as time goes on, sure, compared to a Nautilus, we're looking at the most extreme examples. But some of the other alternatives, think the Ingenieurs, the Girard Perregaux Laureatos, things that I've always talked about as cool, quirky, and really great value are starting to kind of creep up and be in check with the watch that you would have been comparing it with in the first place, right? Looking at another example, the Omega Seamaster 300M ceramic bezel. This is a watch that I know so many of you out there enjoy. I've owned versions of this in the past, but Omega is also tightening up their distribution channels. We cannot even get the ceramic bezel brand new at a steep discount like we could anymore through our network of partners and dealers that we know and work with. We just can't get it. It's on back order or they're flying off the shelf, so the dealers don't want to sell them at a discount because they just don't need to, quite honestly. So as time goes on, I think the alternative conversation that people have will no longer really start to be, it will no longer be as popular as it has been. Instead, it'll just be like, do you like A or B, without price really being a major factor, as long as we see the trends continue, the watch collecting niche and hobby build up and more people get into it, and it all becomes about preference. And that's what I'm very excited for, because I do see, budget is obviously a factor, right? Budget is a factor when it comes to watches. It's unfortunate that the prices are creeping up on some of these watches that we've all known, loved, and enjoyed as value options. But at the same time, I think that takes the pressure and it pushes less on the cost savings and more on what we prefer as watch collectors, and we can actually truly speak with our preferences in the designs, and the brands can respond, right? They can respond and make more of what we want as watch collectors, because previously it was like, hey, how many pieces can we get rid of? How many more do we have left at the factory, for example, with like a Girard Perregaux? How many more are sitting on the shelves? What can we do to get rid of them at a discount? Now it becomes much more along the lines of how do we impress watch collectors so that they prefer our watch for what it is and not necessarily just the cost savings. And I think when we see time goes on, and if all things, like I said, continue to go on the trend, we're going to see just so many great, cool new watches coming out from brands. We can see it in the last handful of years. Watch brands are becoming more competitive in terms of their offerings. The micro brands are pushing on them. The authorized dealer networks are pushing on them. We on the internet are pushing on them. Collectors are very vocal, both in reviews and blogs and posts. It's only a matter of time, and I think we will see some very great offerings start coming from all the brands across the board, and they'll be vying for our attention as watch enthusiasts and collectors. So I know a bit of a ramble here, but in summation, I think that if we can look past budgetary constraints, which can be difficult, but if it's within some reasonable margin to get truly what you love and enjoy and will be comfortable wearing into the future, but if it becomes more about the flipping potential, then I kind of think we can get lost in the weeds. So I always recommend, and I still do into the future, choose what you like and you're going to wear. And trust me, I see people that buy something from an authorized dealer or through somewhere else, and they go to sell it to us, like at DelrayWatch.com, where we buy, sell, and trade, and they just say, it didn't resonate with me, but I thought it was interesting, or maybe they got the Submariner, it doesn't fit. Someone called today, and they bought the Sea Dweller because of the desirability, and it was just too large for them, so they wanted to get into a different watch that was more for them, something of an alternative watch, but they went for the more desirable watch at the time. So once again, buy and wear what you enjoy and what you see yourself living with into the future, and you cannot go wrong. Thanks, guys. You've been chatting with John P. Ciao.